This theme is all about daily living. The purpose is to help participants see in practical and concrete ways how to structure their homes and lifestyles in ways that feel containing and safe. This is critical for children who have broken trust. The characteristics in this theme really hit the nail on the head of what we're going for: trustworthiness, emotionally supportive and nurturing, and attunement. Some might think of this theme as one that explains what to do in crisis, but the focus is actually on how to prevent crises from happening or to reduce the effects of them when they do. There's a lot of video clips and handouts in this theme because what we want to do is stay very concrete with strategies in this theme. It's 2 hours long. Now let's talk about the nuts and bolts in this theme. It's very important to nestle the content of this theme into the NTDC curriculum itself. The first slide grounds all the things we're going to talk about in this new parenting paradigm that participants have learned in other themes. Make a point to emphasize the relationship building they're doing as the number one thing they can do to prevent behaviors from escalating. This includes staying tuned in to the child's cues that something is building. Notice we frame this as the pyramid of prevention to show the amount of time that's best spent in these other areas rather than managing the crisis. We'll next show a clip from the documentary Foster, and it's going to show an experienced foster mom in concrete ways showing what we mean to start a day off right for a child to feel safe. This segues us into a conversation about the importance of routines and rituals and showing again literally what these look like in a daily way. We'll next show another clip from Foster to accompany discussion of how to balance structure with flexibility. We wanted to show this live in a video clip because it's often an area where people struggle with being too heavy on one or the other side of the continuum. We don't want parents to be like drill sergeants, but we don't want them to be overly laid back either. So again, staying in the concrete, we'll unpack what attunement looks like. And that includes how to read a child's cues when they're just barely starting to escalate. This is not often taught, so we literally want to draw that out in these video clips, like every detail of what it looks like in their body language and their tone of voice. Then we put a short but important slide on celebrating small successes because it's huge to keep people going when their kids are struggling. Next, we'll go through a series of slides that discuss practical tools that people can use to stay on track, like staying curious and not taking things personally. Know that this would be the area to share more about your state's regulations on prudent parenting. Then we'll end this section with 2 more video clips of a mom with a teenager on her first day of placement. We want to draw out in the same exact scene how to use mundane moments like a conversation between a parent and a child on what to eat that can help to build trust or break it down with a child. We're going to depict these 2 different ways of dealing with the same situation so that participants can then discuss which would be better and why it would be better. The second half of this theme stays practical, but gradually builds to talking about tighter and tighter structure. This is again an example of layered learning in the NTDC, where we don't want to jump right into the most challenging information at the beginning of a theme, but rather create a strong foundation first. You'll go through a series of slides about how parents can and should be proactive, like anticipating triggers for a child in advance. We'll watch a scene from Instant Family or use a scenario that describes that same scene. You're only going to do one of these options. They both have the same goal, which is to pick apart how it could have been avoided or minimized. And it'll also illustrate our good characteristic of maintaining a sense of humor. After you do this, point out 3 handouts: a sample safety plan, a guide to filling one out, and a sample of a completed one. The last section focuses on managing crises. To do this, we'll use the acronym of STEPS. The first S is safety. Parents need to survey and clear the scene so nobody gets hurt when a crisis is starting. The T stands for tone of voice. We mean your body language by this because that's escalating or calming, as we learned about in the trauma themes. Parents also need to develop the skill of being aware what it looks and sounds like when a situation is escalating and when a person is escalating. So we want them to remind themselves that they need and deserve positive self-talk and a calming tone of voice, both for themselves and for the children. The E stands for empathy. As we've said, the content from the foundational themes is still very applicable in these moments, so we want to remember that empathy here. In the jar and attachment, remember, we need to protect our relationships with children first above all else, and that empathy is going to help. Even meltdowns and crisis are opportunities for relationship building. The P stands for positive reinforcement. Hit home specifically how to talk during crises. This is a great place to remember. Less is more. We don't want any lectures in the middle of a crisis. The next S is for support. We want our folks to be empowered to ask for help. Steps will be followed by a slide to remind of what not to do during escalated times. And we've also made a point to show that escalated behaviors may include internalized behaviors, not just escalated ones. So the example that we follow this up with is self-harm. And there's additional information on this in a handout so that they can dig more deeply into the area of self-harm, because it's not uncommon for kids, but we don't describe it much in NTDC. So make sure you're familiar with that resource. Then before the theme ends, we're going to do an activity where participants will be broken up into small groups by you so that they can practice just one of the steps. And that's going to be the E, the empathy, because that's the area that most people are challenged with the most. So the purpose is to practice and develop a skill. In this case, it's going to be on the empathy. And then those vignettes are going to be assigned to each of the groups by you. This theme, as always, ends with the reflection relevance activity. And this one asks about their fears surrounding the behaviors that we've been talking about, because these are the most challenging ones. And then they're going to think about how they can apply what they've learned in today's theme to those concerns. If you have time, this would be a great one to do in class because it's really good to process and reinforce their learning. The key takeaways from this theme are that we want participants to walk away empowered to deal with any escalation of behavior that may come their way. Of course, they may feel nervous still, but we want them to have all the tools necessary. This theme also has the benefit of helping participants think through worst-case scenario that can happen in real life when they get home. And not just how they'll deal with it, but the practical impact that it'll have on them and their worlds. Ideally, participants will take away what each one of the steps is, but just the concept is good because they can always practice and learn those later on their own. So concrete daily strategies they'll use to create a home environment where minimal escalations occur is our goal from this theme. Now let's talk about a few tips for where you might incur some challenges. Because this theme is so practical and often self-explanatory, you, the facilitators, don't necessarily experience a lot of problems, but there are a lot of details and tech maneuvering to cover through, especially with all those video clips and lots of moving handouts and pages turning. So be sure you know your content really well and have everything handy so that you don't get tripped up. The other area I'd like to highlight is the steps, because I've seen it used in all different ways in the pilots and they're not all accurate. We've conceived these as steps to use in an escalated situation or a crisis, not in the way that people regularly parent. Even though they're really useful, all the things that you learned in the foundational themes is the way that we want for our participants to be learning how to parent. The core parenting has already been established, particularly in the trauma-informed parenting theme and the attachment theme. There really is power in practicalities. Content like this helps parents where the rubber meets the road. It's often uncharted territory for them and sometimes even us, so stay true to the content and everyone will go away feeling empowered and hopefully lighter, even though they're now carrying a full toolbox to take on parenting.